There we go. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Rav Shmuel Ben Yehoshua with you, Rabbi Stephen Epstein, with this week's 10-minute Torah. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're enjoying the summer. I'm decked out a little bit, a little bit of a summer dress. What's interesting is that as how Shavuot sort of coincides with Memorial Day. And Memorial Day on the secular calendar is considered the unofficial beginning of summer because summer really starts during the summer solstice, which is June 21st, June 22nd, somewhere thereabouts when the daylight is longer. And in the Hebrew calendar, we have holidays that kind of earmark the seasons as well. So our year starts in the spring with the month of Aviv. Aviv is the Hebrew word for spring. Today we know that month is named as Nisan. So that's when Moses led our ancestors out of bondage in Egypt. We're going to be talking about that a little bit today in today's Parsha. And that, of course, is Passover. And that's sort of spring. Then we count the Omer for about 50 days, actually for 50 days. It's exactly that, give or take 6 weeks. And at the end of that, we have Shavuot, which is sort of the beginning of summer. And Passover, of course, is when we released from our bondage. Shavuot, when we got the Torah, which just passed. Hope you all enjoyed it and really thought about what the Torah means for us because it's a very awesome legacy. We've got the high holidays, which is fall, and then we've got Hanukkah, which is and Tish B'Av, Tu B'Shvat rather, which is kind of like our winter. So that's kind of how our seasons go in the Hebrew calendar. Now, before we get into our uh, Torah study, um, we all know the crises and the tragedies that have befallen us or fallen our people. Our people are very familiar with tragedies, and the last two incidents, um, the attack in Boulder, a bunch of senior citizens would gather together every week, and they do a little walk, in commemoration and memory of the hostages still being held in Gaza by the terror group Hamas. And make no mistake, they are a terror group. We also remember the two young people that were on the verge of getting married that were gunned down, that were assassinated by a terrorist in Washington, D.C. Um, People that know me know I can be very radical. I can act very radical at all time at sometimes. I care very deeply about my people, not just Jews, but the human race. That's also my people. But as a Jew, God has touched me and all the other Jews in the world. Make no mistake that we are here to set an example, to do good, to love justice, love mercy, and walk humbly to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with Hashem, as the prophet Micah put it. We're also here to love our fellow as ourself. We're also here to honor the stranger, things that people do not do, unfortunately. And for that, we have been vilified. We have been attacked throughout the ages, and yet we still survive. And we survive because we are a strong people. And we've made that covenant with God, and God has honored his covenant. And we honor that by studying Torah, as some of you who saw my last sermon heard. We honor Torah. We live Torah. We don't just read it and say, oh, that's interesting. We study it so we can do it. And that's very important. So let's get to Beha'alotcha, and let's look at our triennial portion. We are looking at the third of the Parsha. And it starts out with complainers. Some people are just never happy. And in previous years, when I've gotten to this part, I've said, well, here we go again. People are just, our ancestors weren't happy. But here's what happened. As some of you may remember, it was about 2.5 million people that walked out of Egypt. And make no mistake, it wasn't all the Jews that left. There were Jews that were Egyptianized, if you will, and stayed. They became Egyptian. Just like later on, when the Greeks had an influence or tried to influence Judea, there were Jews that became Hellenistic, that started enjoying the Greek lifestyle. There were Jews that converted to Christianity, right? There were Jews that were persecuted, and on and on and on. We know the story. But these people left, and there was with them the Erev, the rabble, the non-Jews that either thought they were going to convert or just use the confusion to leave with everybody else and maybe look for a better life or just escape their own bondages of Egypt. So there they are, and they were instigators. They were idol worshippers. So when people were in the desert, now what they're doing is they're saying, where's our meat? Well, what's for dinner? What's for breakfast? Manna. Oh, okay. What's for lunch? Manna. What's for dinner? Manna again? What about tomorrow? Oh, more manna. And God designed manna so that it tasted like your favorite food. Now, if it were me and if I was in the wilderness and I was one of those Israelites walking, which may be in a previous lifetime, I know we've discussed that. Maybe I was, and for me, manna would have tasted like chocolate. Not that anybody knew what chocolate was back then. I think it was invented or developed later on. I'm not sure what they used for sweets, but the Torah describes it as tasting like honey, which is, I mean, for me, a far cry from chocolate, but what are you going to do? Okay. But that was the problem. People like, where's our meat? And it's not even, God, can we like have a meat meal like once in a while? Would that be cool? Instead, they're complaining. And they're like, gee, back in Egypt, it was like an all-you-can-eat buffet with fish and leeks and vegetables and grain, and it was wonderful and it was great, and they're forgetting, the 16-hour days that they worked with with getting lashed on the back, and no straw. They somehow they kind of forgot all that, you know. And even if they hadn't, look what God did for them. Brought them out of Egypt to be free, rescued them at the sea, and defeated the Egyptians. Some of the remains of the drowned Egyptians washed on the shore to show, see what God did. God provided water through Miriam. God provided the manna. God provided shelter, the cloud, to lead them and tell them when to camp and when to go and help them defeat enemies. And it still wasn't enough. It still wasn't enough. And it was this rabble that kind of instigated it. So, of course, God made quick work out of them, and that was it. So, I've said in previous years when I've done these Devar Torah that these people had a slave mentality. They were used to being abused. They were used to being secondary citizens, second class, not worth the humanity, right? Being looked down upon as a foreign entity. And maybe that was it. But the more I personally delve into it now, and think you folks think about this, consider what I'm saying, and if you want to leave a comment, that's great. I love a good discussion. Maybe this is just human nature. People are never satisfied. And God kind of knew this when he gave us the 10th commandment, don't covet your neighbor's whatever, right? Because God knew that, you want what they have. And again, it's okay to want what they have. If my neighbor has a Porsche, I want to keep up with the Jones, or in our case, the Steins, right? And I want to go out and I want to make some money, a lot of money, so I can buy a Porsche. Now, my wife would personally prefer a van, a nice van, of course, with all the amenities, and I kind of not into Porsches myself. I kind of like maybe a Jeep or, we have a Subaru, so whatever. But the idea is it's okay to work hard and want things. People say, well, gosh, I'm blessed. Well, maybe you're blessed because you worked real hard and you earned it. You know what I mean? God didn't just say, okay, I think, let's see, who am I going to favor today? Oh, you. Okay. Yeah, here you go. Here's a Porsche. It's not the way it is. And some people just basically, they don't check out of life, but they don't push themselves and they don't make a life for themselves. And, when push comes to shove, let's maybe make it somebody else's problem. Okay? It happens. But for the most part, and this is what's great about our country and about a lot of the civilized world, is that, everybody can make their own opportunity. And that's what's beautiful. So God gave the Israelites their opportunity. He said, just go along with things. It's not a big deal. Just do the services, do the offerings when you need to. Just and they didn't. They were never satisfied. This is the way people are. They're just not satisfied with what they have. They want more, and they want whatever. I'm going off on a tangent. Okay, I'm in one of my moods. But you get what I'm saying. And why do we have this? Why is this part of the Torah? Because I think a big part of it is so that we will look at it and we will say, come on, guys, look what God did for you. So we can feel that frustration and we can relate to it and say, I'm going to do better. I'm going to appreciate what I have. It's okay to work for more, but you know what? Let's count our blessings. Let's look at what we have and be thankful that we have it, that our work has paid off, and thank God. That's why Judaism is so full of prayers. There's a prayer for everything because we want to maintain that connection to God, not just make the secular holy, but we want to maintain that relationship, that connection, and understand that it's through God's good graces that we have things. So let's not forget that. Shabbat Shalom. Be strong. Chazak, chazak, v'nitazek. Let's be strong. Let's be Jews. Be careful. Take steps. But let's remember we are Jews and we have every right to express who we are. Shabbat Shalom.